So starting off today with a little bit of a warm-up. This is a named tweet. It's called Grouping Thoughts. Grouping Thoughts, kind of a series of phrases here that talk a little bit about, well, sort of collectivism, hive mind mentality, groupthink. But we're just going to go through these and talk a little bit about that subject. So, grouping thoughts. Number 1, being the collective. Number 2, enriching the tribe. Number 3, practicing the religion. Number 4, promoting the ideology. Number 5, appealing to authority. Number 6, echoing the majority. Number 7, following the leader. And my computer has given us a little technical difficulty. I guess it didn't like us following the leader. Or I believe the next one being number 8, trusting the government. Trusting the government. We are grouping thoughts here. Number 9, surrendering the self. And number 10, living by association. So on this channel, you may find that I advocate for individualism, individual agency, independent thought, and so forth. And I'm not trying to necessarily demonize a group mentality, but I do think that it should be held to account. I believe that, ultimately we should be viewing human beings as individuals and not by the groups they may be a part of. I think we should look at character, merits, and flaws of each individual person and go from there, as opposed to looking at what their associations are or, what group they may be a part of. May it be mutable or immutable, like a skin tone, a sex, a sexuality. That's immutable. You can't change it. And then you have, on the other side, you have mutable characteristics, things like religion, occupation, and ideology, so on and so forth on this side. These are things that can change, that you can adapt to. And immutable would be a characteristic that is built in. So while we're going through here, we'll start one by one, grouping thoughts. Number 1, being the collective. So sometimes it's better to err on the side of the consensus. In science, well, it can be a dicey proposition if you're always going with what's already known, because the scientific method is, of course, A/B testing, bringing two sides together and then doing experiments, comparing, contrasting, and coming to a new conclusion, which is then, again, put into another scientific process, a Socratic process if you're talking about philosophy and talking about ideas. Just getting to the nitty-gritty, getting down deep. But being the collective, sometimes people fall into what is considered, some would consider to be a hive mind kind of mentality. Like, well, if the majority of people are doing this thing, if this is the consensus, is that, it is important to, recognize consensus. Sometimes there's situations where it can be beneficial. But at the same time, we should always be placing ourselves in a position to challenge the consensus. It's just like I say about echo chambers and going on vacation. You should use an echo chamber as a vacation home if you're seeking intellectual enlightenment. You shouldn't live there. You should have your home out where you can debate and have a more constructive dialogue where you're being challenged. People aren't just agreeing with you. But of course, when you're trying to rest your mind, it's cognitively taxing. You do want to go into a smaller echo chamber where you can kind of, if your position is good, you can fortify it and so forth. And so when we talk about groupthink, we also talk about the tribe, tribalism. Number 2, enriching the tribe. So we all fall into a bit of a tribe mentality. It's just a consequence of being human. It's part of the way our minds think. Like, we do seek like minds. We do seek people that share our value system. And so we do join a tribe. It's tribes all the way down. May it be something that's like, you're a sovereign citizen of this country. That's a tribe. America is a tribe. France is a tribe. Japan, China. There is a singular group mentality to having a nation state, having a nation, having a large group of people. So when you're in this large group, you have your tribe. It's fortified. You have a singular purpose: protect the tribe, stick with the tribe, improve the tribe, embrace the tribe. Number 3, practicing the religion. So I do frame it, some of this group mentality, some of this collectivist mentality can fall under modern religion. This is when you have a ideology or belief system that even the devoutly secular, well, can fall into and place faith over reason. I've been talking about the modern religion that is institutions a little bit, and it turns out prophets of the modern religion of institutions happen to spend a lot of time in the cathedral. Now, what is the cathedral? Well, seek subject matter experts. I do say seek subject matter experts, and I talk about appealing to authority, but I'm not using it in a pejorative sense. Sometimes the experts are the best way to go, but we can't place faith over reason. We have to explore for ourselves. But the cathedral, you should check out this author, Moldbug. I haven't read too much of his stuff. I don't know how much I agree with or how much I disagree with, but he talks about this concept of the cathedral. And when we talk about the modern religion that is institutions, we have state, media, and academia, the elite class. So these protected groups, not protected as in protected classes, but there is this sort of established status quo in the power structure. And the cathedral, I would recommend looking into it and seeing what it's all about, because really the modern religion of institutions and the cathedral hypothesis or analysis have a lot of congruity. They have a lot of, consistency between them. So continuing down that road, promoting the ideology. A singular moral or social code that holds people together, that people can join up and believe in a singular path, a singular purpose. When I talk about modern religion, we can talk about an ideology such as the modern religion of social justice. Now, check out my video, Social Justice is a Modern Religion, for more about that topic. We will be talking about that a bit today on our tweet video, but that one wraps up a lot of the different points about the cultural Marxism, social Marxism, identity politics, intersectionality, and the general social justice collectivist world. So when you're in a group and you have a belief system, you promote it. You promote the ideology. You persuade on behalf of it. And you commit appeals to authority. You make appeals to authority. That's number 5. Appealing to authority. So, when you have a large group of people under one umbrella, you have a large group, well, it still needs a leader. It still needs to have some centralization at the top so that there is a clear direction. There are what I call, in the world of modern religion, you have your popes, you have your prophets, and then you have disciples that follow the words and actions of the popes and prophets. And then, of course, you have your martyrs. Those are people that simply just don't get on board with this modern religion. I happen to be agnostic on many of them, including social justice, censorship, global warming, institutions, moral panic, outrage culture, and celebrity. It's hard for me to place faith over reason in these belief systems. and make appeals to authority. But we do it every day. Even somebody that's individualistic, that may hold a bit of skepticism, I do also, of course, appeal to authority. There are certain people, certain groups, certain institutions that have developed a pretty good idea of what's going on. So again, it's very hard. You really have to drill down and dig deep. Right down to the comments section below, where you can leave me a comment with your accolades, criticisms, your derision, or hey, start the dialogue. We can certainly talk about whatever is going on in these videos. Number 6 is echoing the majority. So when you are talking about a collectivist system such as the world of social justice, you have an oppressor and an oppressed. Those are two groups, and people are arbitrarily placed into these groups. Their character aside, if you're looking at the Marxist scholars might want to disagree with me on the use of Marxism when talking about social or cultural Marxism, but the general idea, when Marx wrote about classism and class, putting people into different groups, elite, and then the populists, and so on and so forth, the idea of just collectivism, of grouping people together, comes in some degree from Marx, one of the 19th, I should say, century philosophies. So echoing the majority, which is very interesting because you have a system, it's almost a contradiction. You have a system where, the disciples of the modern religion of social justice, say that the majority is typically or always the oppressor. They're the bad guy, the one where you should direct your hatred. And when I say hatred, I don't mean necessarily in a severe manner, but when you're talking about a spectrum of hate and love, the ones that should be harmed, that should have their assets harmed or their livelihood harmed, perhaps to create the equality that is sort of the deity in this modern religion. Give money, give resources from the oppressor to the oppressed, and suddenly you have moral virtue and you have universal truth. So echoing the majority, it's a very interesting thing because they do fight for the underdog. It's a egalitarian position. It is a virtuous position in many ways. But again, things can be taken too far. Thinking in absolutes is a fool's errand, but certainly things can be taken too far, especially when you combine these postmodern framings of reality with absolutism. When you say you are absolutely your group or your association, you are your skin tone, you are your sex, your gender, you are, when you are put into that very narrow box and then defined based on your immutable characteristics, it kind of does you a disservice because you have your individual merit, you have your agency in the world, and you're not just part of, we're all 7 billion individuals on this earth. It's not all about which groups you're a part of. So echoing the majority, sort of going with consensus, and yet there is that contradiction about, well, the oppressor is the majority. Would you want to go with them, or would you rather fight for the oppressed? Would you fight for those that you have deemed oppressed? It can be kind of a dicey proposition. Number 7, following the leader. Following the leader. So again, even when you have a big group, there's got to be a figurehead at the top. And that is the authority figure, the guiding light for the group, for the collective, for the hive mind. There must be that queen or king at the top that holds it all together and creates unity and creates purpose for the group. Following the leader, appealing to their authority. And on the same lines, we have number 8, trusting the government. Now, I'm not saying we should have complete distrust of the government. I think that we should hold them accountable. We should hold them to a transparent standard. That's why I do support WikiLeaks and Project Veritas and all of these whistleblowing groups. I support the work of Edward Snowden, revealing what happened in the NSA, what was happening with mass surveillance of American citizens, and what Julian Assange has revealed over time about the military and, of course, about our political parties, such as the Democrat Party. In 2016, with the Podesta leaks, the Podesta emails from his Gmail account, which I believe was spoofed, or poor John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, was phished. But when you trust the government too much, when you place too much authority in a system that is not accountable, like, yes, we can vote politicians out of office that are not performing up to specification, that are not fulfilling their promises. The Trump campaign has promises made, promises kept, which is very rare in contemporary politics, notably U.S. politics, because, frankly, I call politics a post-truth realm where you have persuasion, you have big asks by Trump, Bernie Sanders, all these different individuals. They make a promise, but it's very hard sometimes for them to keep that promise. There are a lot of systems in place. There are a lot of people in place, power standing in the way. It's all this long negotiation, 3D chess, 4D chess, people doing deals. You have deals between parties. You have deals with corporations. You have deals with other countries. And again, there's always the question of quid pro quo when you're working, when you have, Hillary Clinton going around with the Clinton Foundation and taking money from all these foreign entities, Qatar, and so on and so forth. Bill Clinton was paid by Russia. There's a lot of money. Politics is a world of money and resources being moved around. And frankly, it is a post-truth realm because politicians lie. In fact, when Bernie Sanders came out in 2016 and he said, the difference between me and the other candidates, the other people in the field, is we are telling the truth. The Bernie Sanders campaign is telling the truth. Well, to some degree. He was using hyperbole. He was making promises, economic promises that, well, he probably, even if elected, could not keep. So there is this sort of carrot and stick mentality. There are promises being made that are often not kept. So trusting the government, if you give the government too much control, you fall into situations like what happened with Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon said, well, it's not illegal if the president does it, right? That doesn't sound very fair to me. It sounds slightly dangerous, putting too much power on one person. That's why we have separation of powers. That's why you need a supermajority to get things done sometimes in the Senate and the House. But you really can't trust the government too much because, as we know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And sometimes even the best of intentions lead you to hell. They lead you right on the road to hell. So, trusting the government, I don't think we should distrust the government per se, but I also don't think we should put too much power in their hands. So I do support, in many ways, kind of a smaller government. I support big military for protection, but in terms of the bureaucracy, I do think we could afford to make the government just a little smaller, a little more efficient. But trusting it, of course, believing in the prophets of the modern religion that is institutions, and doing that without question, well, that could be problematic. Number 9, surrendering the self. So giving up, surrendering the self, giving up your individual thought, your individual view, and handing it over to the collective, echoing what this group says. Giving up your individual voice and saying, well, I need to stick to the script. I need to stay to code. When we're talking about censorship or social justice, it's a code that's in place that people can abide by. Find moral virtue universal truth, order, purpose, meaning. Find a way to navigate the moral and ethical world using, they don't need to necessarily use a real deity. Well, real being a fun word in this context, but God or Allah, Buddha, they can fall into, even if they're devoutly secular, a modern religion. Ideology and reality run on separate, interweaving tracks. But we can lose sight of that if we place faith over reason and don't ask enough questions and don't question the answers. If we have more answers than questions, Richard Feynman talks about that, the famous scientist and skeptic. It's important for us to not surrender our individual thoughts and just go along. We should be very careful during the scientific process, during a Socratic process. We should be asking questions and getting down to the nitty-gritty. And of course, applying casual fatalism where needed. Some things can be moved, some things can't. And mapping that out is a good idea. It's a virtuous action. But you don't want to surrender yourself too much. You want to make sure that you're questioning what you're hearing. And just because, 10 people say it, or 100 people, or 1,000,000 people, that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. When we talk about questioning the scientific consensus and challenging it, well, scientific breakthroughs, when they happen, nobody thought that answer, that solution could come out of this. There had been a consensus about what was real. And then a new idea is introduced. And at first, no one believes it because it's never been proven. But then it's proven. So consensus will have to shift to the new idea. So you always have to remain open to that possibility that you might be wrong. Like I say in every one of my tweet videos, everything I say might be wrong, might be right, or somewhere in between. So it's finding that in between, finding that gray area where there are questions and there are places to make comparisons and contrasts between interesting or conflicting ideas. Some people say there's no such thing as a contradiction, in fact. There's just situations where there hasn't been enough revealed, not enough information. And so sometimes digging deeper, oftentimes, will help us achieve a higher form of truth. And finally, grouping thoughts, living by association. So when you get into a groupthink mindset, a right-think and wrong-think mindset, it quickly becomes important to filter people, ideas, groups out of your life that do not meet those moral standards. Because if you're living in a world where we have guilt by association, guilt by conversation, you are your group, you are your immutable characteristics. People have been organizing their lives, cutting people out, bringing people in based on an ideology, a religion, a belief system that matches their own. Because they, some people do see that perhaps there is an impasse. How can you associate, how can you live with somebody that is committing immoral acts, evil, going against the group, going against what you see as logic and reason? Now, again, I think it's more severe with some people than others, but there is this world of association, living by who already conforms to the code that you live by. Now, we do it to various levels, but in the internet age, with information traveling faster than ever, people saying things, there's more dialogue, there's more discussion than ever before. People have been more exposed and more transparent than ever before. We have to remember, we are human beings. We are irrational beings. We say things for humor. We say things for all kinds of reasons. And context matters. But when you're living by association and you're not living true to yourself, but you're going by which group you're a part of, You look at somebody and say, well, they're this label, they're this group, and that's going to determine whether or not I associate with them. I think, in my mind, on this channel, we like to advocate for keeping an open mind and not getting too bogged down in what other people are a part of. You can choose, of course. This is all about choice. It's your choice whether you want to associate with an idea or a person or a group. But I don't think we should be demonizing people based on association. I think we should look at what they've done, what they've actually said, and base it on that. Not look at just a broad label. Using our pattern recognition, we look at something and we say, well, this isn't kosher based on a pattern. We should dig deeper. We should strive for that. Other people may advocate different things on other channels, but Jeff Tidwell advocates individual agency and intellectual dialogue here.